Welcome to the first meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is taking place in person in Sparkano Committee Room at County Hall with some officers who will be joining us online via Microsoft Teams. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting, and ask that everyone please switch their microphone on when speaking and then turn it off when they're speaking. As this is the first meeting of the committee, we should start with some introductions. So if we go round.
Councillor Trevor Pendleton, Castle Donington and Kegworth Ward.
Brian Lovegrove for the Beaver Division, deputising for Mr Harrison Rushton.
Amanda Hack, Bronston Division.
Nick Chapman, Glenfield Forest and Mookside Division.
Good afternoon, Rosita Page, Lutterworth Division.
Anne Crothers, Director, Environment and Transport.
Blake Payne, Lead Member for the Environment and Green Agenda and Bruntingthorpe Division Member.
Okay, so first item on the agenda is appointment of Chairman of the committee for the 2021/2022 year. Mr Trevor Pendleton was nominated as Chairman-elect at the Council meeting on the 7th of July. Can I have a proposer and seconder? That was dependent on
Rosita Page, I propose.
Nick Chapman, happy to second.
Okay, perfect. So Mr Pendleton is now appointed Chair for the 2021/22 year. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. And agenda item 2 is to elect a deputy chairman. Mr Frisbee was nominated as deputy chairman-elect at the County Council meeting on the 7th of July, and I'd like to propose that Mr Frisbee be appointed. Can I have a seconder, please?
Sorry, happy to second.
Thank you. That being duly carried out, we move to agenda item 3, which is question time. And I've received 6 questions from Miss Julia Howard. Unfortunately, she was unable to attend, but has let us have a pre-sight of those questions, which we have all seen. They have also had, she has also submitted further questions, which I think we are now going to answer offline and send those answers to her. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So those questions will be handled for her in full in that way. Agenda item 4, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5, there are none. And 5, to advise of any other items which I've decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda, and there are none. Now, 6, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. I'll go around very quickly and just look, and I see no one wishes to say so. However, Kat, as usual, we have. Okay, Mr Bolter, I'm going to talk about district councillors now. Those of us who are members of other councils, we will, if we may, take those as read and have them read into the minutes of this meeting. Any other declarations? Thank you. So declarations, 7 declarations of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rule 16. Are there any? No, thank you. And then presentations and petitions under Standing Order 35. We haven't any at this time. So on to the substantive agenda, agenda item 9, and which is a briefing on the environment strategy and carbon commitments. Now, members, you have your slides, and I know that I'm going to go to Anne first, Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, to start us off on this particular briefing. Anne.
Thank you, Chair, for that. Just briefly to say, since this is a new committee coming together, we felt it might be helpful if we give you a presentation on the County Council's environment strategy, the work going around to support that, and where we're going in future with that. And you'll be aware, the County Council has its own carbon commitments, and again, the work going on around that to support that, and our future horizon scanning in terms of where we will want to go in meeting those commitments. I'm going to hand over to my environment team manager, James O'Brien, who will take you through that. It'll be hopefully a very useful and informative presentation for you, and we'll take questions after, if that's all right. I'll hand over to James now.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So as has been said, in my presentation, I'm going to cover very quickly, I'm afraid, a briefing on the Council's environment strategy and carbon commitments. Just to give you an overview of the contents. So first of all, I'm going to give a bit of background on the key commitments and policy positions, remind us why the Council needs to take and is taking action on environmental issues, highlight some of the links with the Council strategic plan, a very quick overview of the environment strategy. I'll then highlight some of the key areas of activity, and following that I will focus a bit for a while on the key facts and figures around the Council's carbon reduction commitments, both for the Council itself and for the county as well. I'll then talk a bit about what we're doing around our Action for Nature activities, highlight some of the key partnerships that we're working with to deliver on all this work. And as Anna said, I'll also touch on a bit of horizon scanning to highlight some of the expected policy and legislation changes coming mainly from government, but also internationally as well. And as Anna said, there's an opportunity for questions at the end as well. So in terms of background, the Council's original Environment Strategy 2018 to 30 was originally approved in July 2018. Subsequent to that, the Council declared a climate emergency in May 2019, and as part of that, made a commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030 for the Council's own emissions, and also was originally 2050, but now 2045 for the county of Leicestershire itself. We've also signed up to the UK 100, which is where that 2045 commitment comes from as well. To date, we've achieved, well, up to 2019-20, we have achieved a 67% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the Council's own operations. So as a consequence of that declaration, the environment strategy and also the strategic plan were revised to take account of those commitments, and the revised strategy was approved in July 2020. So why do we need to take action on environmental issues? And the answers to these questions are extracts from the environment strategy. So I think this will be just useful to set some of the kind of context and background to why we're doing what we're doing. So first of all, there is an increased risk of disruption to our critical services due to the extreme weather events that are and will be happening. Particularly vulnerable people in the community are more susceptible to the effects of climate change. There is a risk of increased damage to council highways assets. Also, there's increased costs on public health due to a rise in illness and deaths, etc., caused by air pollution. Also, pressures and costs on social services as well. We also want to reduce the cost of managing the council's waste and the county's waste as well. And there is a risk of reputational and financial costs if we don't deal with the various pollution and environmental events. The council also has a statutory responsibility to take due regard of biodiversity in all its decisions and activities. So taking action in this area demonstrates that duty. Leicestershire is a rural county, and the food sector is one of the county's main industries, so will be affected by any reductions in crop yields or any difficulties in food production. We also want to protect Leicestershire residents from the consequences of food shortages and the health effects of biodiversity loss. We want to protect the most vulnerable in our society from harm, or we want to avoid or reduce the increased future costs on the council that will be caused by the predicted environmental changes that's expected. Moving on from that, then as part of the 2020 interim review of the strategic plan for the council, the environmental and carbon commitments were embedded into that document. And as you may know, the strategic plan is currently going through a full review, and the intention is to have a separate environmental outcome which will pick up these aspects more fully. And a draft revised strategic plan will be taken to this committee, I believe, in November. A quick highlight of the environment strategy itself. It consists of 15 aims and 37 objectives set across 6 themes. And the themes are around carbon, climate change, resource use, zero carbon energy, travel and transport, biodiversity, community and well-being, as well as the local economy. And there's a hyperlink on the slide if you want to go to the document itself. I think it's also important to highlight the interconnected nature of there's many global emergencies that we're dealing with. Obviously, coronavirus is one of them. But in terms of global kind of environmental emergencies, we've got climate change, biodiversity loss, and resource exploitation. And they're all interconnected. There are feedback loops across those 3 areas. But in order to address those emergencies, we need to have 3 interconnected global solutions, which in summary include move towards a low carbon economy, adapting to the climate change that is and will happen, moving to a circular economy where resources are more reused and recycled, and a recovery of the significant biodiversity loss that we're experiencing on the planet. A quick run through of the key activities in this area. So in terms of carbon reduction, both at a council and a county level, there's work taking place around decarbonising energy. The council's own strategic property energy strategy. There's, as you know, we're doing a lot more work around adding renewable energy, solar panels, the biomass boiler, etc. There's also work taking place working with colleagues in public health around decarbonising housing stock, particularly for new builds and retrofits. There's work taking place to decarbonise travel and transport, particularly looking at encouraging electric vehicles and improving electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Hopefully you'll be well aware of all the work we're doing to encourage more walking and cycling. We're also providing carbon literacy training, both to staff and to members of the community. And we are working with colleagues in public health to identify and act on the co-benefits for the environment around improving air quality. On biodiversity and nature, on natural capital, we've now got our Action for Nature document and delivery plan. We're obviously taking action on addressing the significant ash dieback disease issue. We've recently released a new tree management strategy, which includes the pledge to plant over 700,000 trees over the coming 10 years or so. And as part of the Environment Bill, we're expecting to also work on developing a nature recovery strategy for the area. On climate adaptation and resilience, we're obviously dealing with the existing impacts of climate change, but we're also starting to do some planning for the future impacts as well. You'll hear later on more about what we're doing around waste management and resource use, so I won't dwell on that. And as a council, we have very, very robust environmental management systems and environmental performance monitoring and reporting mechanisms as well, which are an important part of what we need to do to understand where we are at and the scale of the task. Okay, the next couple of slides are going to focus on the carbon reduction, so meeting our net zero carbon commitments, both as a council and as a county. What I'm trying to do here on this slide is just show, I suppose, the difference and the difference in the scale of the council's own emissions and the emissions of the county. As you can see, as of 1920, the council's what we call measured emissions are around 12,000 tonnes of greenhouse gases, CO2e. But we also are aware that there are emissions that we either can't or find difficult to measure. And if we counted those, we we estimate there's a 40 to 41,000 tonnes of emissions coming from kind of council activity, council operations. But that is dwarfed by the emissions of the county itself. If you just look at what's called the emissions under local authority influence, which is a base definition from the government, it's roughly almost 3.4 million tonnes of emissions, just CO carbon dioxide in the county. If you also add on the wider emissions in the county and include other greenhouse gas emissions, it's an additional 3 million tonnes. You're looking at roughly 6.4 million tonnes emissions per year, as of 2019 for the county. So the council's emissions are only a minute fraction of the county's emissions. I won't dwell on this, but it just shows you what we include when we're talking about both the council's emissions and the county-wide emissions. And you'll see we're looking at emissions from our fleet, from our buildings, business mileage, and so on. And there's some of the measured and unmeasured emissions in the out of scope section. And we are looking at that and looking to see what other emissions could we include in the measured emissions. But that will depend on the difficulty and the ability to measure those emissions in an accurate way. And then on the county-wide emissions, you can see that we're including emissions from industry, commercial, public sector, domestic and transport. Then if you look at the wider emissions, it also includes wider greenhouse gas emissions and also emissions from aviation, rail, etc. Looking back again at the council's own emissions, just to give you an idea of where the main sources are. As you can see, our buildings make up 36% of those emissions, street lighting, traffic signals 29%, fleet vehicles 22%, and business travel 13%. So these do not include the unmeasured emissions I mentioned earlier, but just gives you an idea of the main sources. But we have a plan to reduce those down to zero by or as close to zero or net zero by 2030. Some of the reduction will happen naturally through national changes from decarbonising the grid and the increased use of electric vehicles and so on. But within our area of kind of control, we're looking at improving our LED rollout. As we buy new equipment, it'll be more efficient, so you'll see savings there. We're also looking at the solar farm at Quorn. Moving on then, we're looking at improving our fuel management, our fuel use, looking at what vehicles can be switched to electric vehicles, improving what we're doing where we can on low-level street lighting management, and also looking at further solar or wind farms, see what the potential is there. The more complex kind of lower tone areas are further work around biomass, ground or air source heating, improvements to traffic signal lights, broader EV replacement, particularly for the larger vehicles. And again, we're also exploring options for formal offsetting of those emissions to achieve the net zero position. This just gives you an idea of the kind of trajectory we could go on. So the blue line is up to 2020 is where we've got to. So you can see there's quite a steep drop. And if we can do all of what was on the previous slide, you can see the yellow line going down to net zero by 2030. Again, looking back at the county's emissions, just highlighting the sources again. As you can see, transport makes up the majority at 35%, industry and commercial sources 34%, domestic sources 31%, so almost an even split among those three sources. However, there is some variation across the districts when you look at per capita emissions. If you just look at the wider emissions, you can see Obi and Wigston as low as 3.1 tonnes per person, whereas Northwest Leicestershire is 10.9 tonnes. So not all parts of the county have got equal share, let's say, of the emissions in the county. Kind of looking forward a bit in terms of the challenge of reducing those emissions. This slide is just showing where we've moved from in 2005 to 2019. So as you can see, we have seen a decrease, but it's not going to be enough to meet the challenge of 2050 net zero target. Just highlighting here how the mix has changed over time. You can see that in the pie charts, but it's more obvious in the next slide. So as you can see, industry, commercial, public sector, domestic have all seen significant reductions over that period, but transport is the one where we've seen very little improvement. And that's why it's moved from a 24% of the emissions to 35% of the emissions. So that's one of the key challenge areas going forward. Again, this slide is trying to highlight, if we just continue on as business as usual, where would we get to? There's certain assumptions in that, but as you can see, if we don't change what we're doing, we're still going to end up with nearly 2 million tons of emissions by 2050. So nowhere near where we need to get to in order to achieve net zero. And this graph is showing what we need to do to get net zero. So quite a steep green line. As you can see, it's quite a rapid reduction is needed initially in order to achieve the kind of flatlining by 2050 or 2045 as the new target. The other point to make on this slide is we have what's called a carbon budget by 2050 of around 35 million tons, and if we continue on as we are, we'll use up that budget within 6 years of 2020. So again, just highlighting the scale of the challenge and the movement that needs to take place. This here again is just showing kind of a planning approach to how we're going to address this. So all those emissions I mentioned, very few of them sit within the control of us as a county council. So we will need to work with partners and colleagues in other sectors to achieve this. So in our approach to develop a plan for doing this, we're basically putting the actions in those different kind of spheres of control and influence. So those from the centre, those that we have direct control over, our buildings, our operations, our travel, all the way out to involving and engaging with others, partners, colleagues, the community, etc., to take action. So that's just highlighting kind of the approach we're taking as a council to tackling the scale of this problem. In terms of the net zero work, my colleague Donna Worship is working on developing a roadmap, and it will provide an inventory of those emissions in more detail than you've seen, identify a number of pathways to achieve the net zero ambition, explore where we have control and influence, and identify lead partners, have estimated costs of what would cost to get to net zero, highlight any gaps in existing powers and resources, identify any co-benefits for the economy and health, and the County Council Net Zero Action Plan will also be outlined and identify the Council's role and contribution to achieving the county target. And both documents will be produced for autumn 2021 and will be coming to this committee at that point. Just quickly on Action for Nature. So we've recently developed a strategic document on this and a supporting delivery plan, which supports the relevant objectives within the environment strategy. What we've tried to do is compile into a single document an understanding of the policy and legislative context within which we're trying to work, understand the current state of nature in Leicestershire, establish our guiding principles and rationale for our approach for taking action, identify key opportunities for action, the supporting delivery plan I mentioned, and also to provide a foundation for further action on nature from the expected legislative changes, etc., that will arise out of the Environment Bill, hopefully by the end of this year. The document tries to value the important and crucial role that ecosystem services play in underpinning our economy and society. And I just want to, I thought that this was a useful graphic to show Our colleagues in the planning and ecology team have carried out a biodiversity quality score of Leicestershire. So blue is low and red is high, as in good quality biodiversity. As you can see, most of Leicestershire is covered in blue squares, highlighting that Leicestershire has one of the lowest biodiversity quality scores in the country. I believe it's second lowest in the country. So there's a lot of work to do to rectify that. In terms of areas where we are focusing our action, we're looking at improving the land management practices of land owned by the council, working with tenants of council land to also better manage this land, ensuring that biodiversity, etc., is included in council policies, plans and projects, influencing where we can and adding value to the policies, plans and projects of others, supporting awareness raising and education on biodiversity, maintaining and developing the local data on ecology and the historic environment, and identifying opportunities to realise ecosystem service benefits on council land, including looking at carbon sequestration and storage opportunities, and that links to the net carbon target I mentioned previously. Very quickly, I won't list them all, but you can see them on the screen. We work with a whole range of partners, from national ones like UK 100, local partners like Charnwood Forest, Regional Park Board, colleagues in public health with the LEP. We also work with the Expert Reference Group, which is a kind of a cross-sectoral group made up of colleagues from universities and private sector, from other public bodies. We also work with the National Forest and the Wildlife Trust. Again, not dwell on that. Quickly, I'll just talk about some of the key pieces of legislation and policy change that we're expecting. As I mentioned, we've got the Environment Bill due in autumn. We've also got a new Planning Bill due. All of those will no doubt have changes in maybe responsibility, legislation, duties, etc. for local government. We're expecting a national infrastructure strategy. We recently had the decarbonisation of transport plan. We're expecting another strategy around electric vehicle infrastructure, a net zero carbon strategy, more requirements around highways maintenance, self-assessment, new standards for homes and buildings, and you would have noticed we've had the recent IPCC climate change assessment report, with 2 more reports due over the next couple of months with more details on mitigation and adaptation. So that's all I've got to say on that, and happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Ladies and gentlemen, comments, questions? Bill?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, there's just a couple. North West Leicester's high carbon, is that because of the airport, or are there other factors involved in that?
Yeah, I believe there's several factors. So the airport, the emissions from the airport is not actually included in that figure. Sorry, some of the emissions from the airport is included on that figure, but not all the emissions from the airport. But it's also due to the nature of the industry for that area, quarrying and so on, and also because of the nature of some of the road networks in that area. Got
It's okay, James. Yeah, you've got the A50, the M1,
A50, yeah,
the
M1.
A6, the A453, yeah, rail freight interchange, all in
Exactly.
North West Leicester, yeah, plus a racetrack.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first one. The second one is, I'm surprised there's any ash dieback on your tree works. I mean, such things as, what about the oaks we're losing, and the beech, the horse chestnut? They're all trees that are now subject to a disease we didn't have before because of climate changes and other things. Insects have moved up from Europe in attacking our trees now. So I'm surprised just ash dieback is there when there's lots of other trees that are suffering and dying out within this country.
Bill, you mic.
Yeah, ash dieback has been recognised nationally as a serious risk to this country, so that's why we're taking action now. We are aware of the other diseases that are on the way, and colleagues in forestry are preparing to work on that. But thankfully, the seriousness of those diseases are not yet to the scale of ash dieback. But those diseases will be part of the future work that's done on protecting and improving our treescape.
Okay, Nick, did you have a question? Okay. And any further, Rosita?
Yes, it's a very innocent question, but in relation to Bill's question, looking at page 20 and the Northwest Leicestershire high carbon emission, I do realise that Harbours is also quite high because we've got Magna Park, the motorways, etc. But what I wonder is, why is it measured per capita? Because at the end of the day, the carbon emissions, say around mine, it's not me that creates it. It is coming from the warehouses, from the motorway and whatever else. So how do we work with the individual big concerns, etc., to get them to buy into this, to do as much as they can to lower this? Thank you.
I think we're on national here. James, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you. So just to answer the first question, per capita is just one way of measuring these emissions, and it just helps you compare one place to another using a common metric. On your second part of the question, yeah, it's part of the national effort, but also it'll also be picked up as part of Donna's work in developing the roadmap that I mentioned, and it'll try to answer some of those questions around what can we do as a council, but what do others need to do.
Okay, any further questions, Amanda?
Just a quick one on that, and I think this is obviously really difficult because this is a new committee about which bits should go where, and certainly one of the things that I found really interesting from Health Scrutiny is the report that came back in terms of the impact it has on the individuals with regards to air quality. And we've obviously looked at carbon per person, but actually the particulates and where they're based, and laying that over the biodiversity graph would be really useful. So I wasn't 100% sure about how much on air quality would feature in this committee.
I think if I can pick that one up, I think we're desperate to make sure we understand the spread of air quality and the particulate spread, because they're quite different. The fallouts are different in the ranges from the roads, etc. So, you know, we certainly want to have a look at that. And we've certainly got to be cognizant of the fact that we do have a particulate problem, and it is around the roads, to play on words in particular, and we do need to understand that. Otherwise, you know, we're not going to get a grip on it, and that'll inform us in lots of ways. And I'll let the Director of Transport, Anne, tell us how.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's just to say that, you know, as you picked up, you know, it's very cross-cutting, isn't it? The same as the whole environment and carbon agenda. Features in the health committee primarily because the Director of Public Health has a responsibility for that. But as you say, you know, it comes across this committee, Highways and Transport one, and it's very much features in, you'll see later in this committee's agenda in our performance report as well. So while I'd say it's led by the Director of Public Health, I'm sure at times we'll probably see reports to other committees depending on the precise nature of, you know, the aspect we're looking around air quality at.
Thank you. Rosita?
Another question just sprung to mind, and for information only. Yes, you did say that we are going to work with other partners eventually to form a strategy, but one of the main underpinning issues is really planning. Now, districts have tried to be environmentally friendly, and I know at our district we had tried to put environmental policies in our local plans. However, they weren't accepted by inspectors. So if all building was to be more environmentally friendly, we would save a great deal of carbon emission. So that is very much what we need is a top-down structure. So, and I'm sure Officer will agree, because we can't do it all on our own. But what can we do to influence government so that we can have things like environmental policies introduced via, say, the planning system or whatever? Is there a way we can influence it by lobbying ministers, etc.? And I'm done. Thank you.
I think, Rosita, I can probably help. The planning white paper is actually now out to consultation, and you are invited to put in your 2 pence. And I think that's absolutely ideal. Certainly, I know that the last NPPF did include, and the next one will also include, new installation levels. Which are bound to be done. I don't know if you want to add anything.
But
else
if I might come back, Chairman,
okay.
That was all very, very minimal. Maybe as a committee and as a part of an action, maybe we should circulate that link again if that is still a live consultation for members to put in their comments. However, I think it is all very, very minimal what developers are doing and what the government is suggesting. Because it does not actually, it is rather profit that plays a major role. And I think as councils and individuals, we can't be held responsible for something we can't influence when developers and major conglomerates can make far more of an effort nationally to reduce that carbon footprint. Thank you.
Okay, I think the consultation white paper link we can circulate, and that won't be a problem at all. I know the lead member wants to come in on this at the moment, and then I'll come across to you.
Thank you. I was going to probably answer that point that Rosita's made directly in my summing up at the end, if you were kind enough to bring me in. But whilst you've given me the microphone, I just want to point out this is a huge challenge. No one denies that. We don't deny what lays ahead. One of the things this county council's done is to join up with national organisations such as UK 100 for the very reason that Rosita's just said, that we are pretty ineffectual as a standalone county council in lobbying ministers and putting our case across. So, but collectively with other local government organisations and similar organisations, I think we have a stronger voice. So we're a part of UK 100 for that very reason. We come together and we make the points that affect our counties and our rural localities together to government, and hopefully they're taken up and dealt with at the right level.
Thank you. Nick, you want to make a point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is, we're looking here at partial replacement to EV of fleets and everything else. Has any consideration been took into using hydrogen in vehicles going forward, please?
I'll start. Maybe James will want to come in with a wee bit more detail, but we're certainly looking at all technologies, but it has to be on a business case basis for that individual service area. For instance, HGVs at the moment, and we have a lot in our fleet in terms of our highway operation and our waste operations. The technology, the electric vehicle technology isn't there at the moment. Hydrogen may be something that's a solution. So we are very alive to, we need to keep looking at what the technology is doing and can it deliver a fit for purpose vehicle for the service that we actually have to provide for our residents there. So it's an ongoing balance. But answer to your question, we're looking across the board at different technologies, and then if that's available and fit for purpose, we then look at the fueling, etc., what we need to do in order to support that, what infrastructure we need to put in order to support that. So yes, we are looking across the board at different technologies.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Now, I'll just defer to the lead member again in case he has other things more specific to other questions that he'd like to cover.
Thank you, Chairman. All I want to say is thank you to James, who you can see is a passionate advocate, not only a qualified advocate, but one that's extremely passionate about the agenda the County Council has chosen to follow. James gave a similar briefing during lockdown via Zoom, some of the returning members might recall. And for the new members, this isn't, an old agenda, this is a live agenda. And if you have something to contribute or you wish to see the County Council explore different means and mechanisms, by all means, please do bring it to the attention of this committee, where officers and myself can then factor that into subsequent discussions. It is a huge challenge, as we've just talked about. We've done extremely well as a county council to bring our carbon emissions down. I think they're roughly at about 11,000 tonnes, and we're pretty confident we will meet our obligations in terms of reducing our own direct emissions. But the wider challenge is dealing with Leicestershire carbon emissions and those that are deemed to be under local authority control. And we've already talked about the airport and the M1 and the busy road network, some of which is under the responsibility and control of the Department for Transport and Highways England. So those assets are still deemed to be under our Leicestershire control, in spite of the fact we don't have direct levers to come up with policies and take actions in order to deal with that. We don't deny, going back to Rosita's point, that industry contributes a huge amount towards climate change. But equally, on the slide, I think it's on page 24, there's a very useful slide that demonstrates collectively, out of transportation, domestic, public sector, commercial, industry, how we collectively contribute towards climate change. And ultimately, it's human beings that make the decisions that are in our power to control the impact of climate change and reduce carbon emissions. So actually, at all levels, it is directly responsible to humans to make those decisions and to be aware about our behaviours. So this is a huge agenda we have. You've already heard there's lots of facets to it, not least biodiversity, transportation, buildings. We've set out an ambitious plan to tackle our own emissions, and we're going to need all the help we can get to deal with the wider emissions emanating from Leicestershire. But it's a journey that I'm up for, and it's one that we should champion and take forth without fear. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you ever so much. That's super. And I'm going to say thank you now to James. Absolutely brilliant, and we do look forward to receiving your revised strategic plan at our November meeting. That will be, I think, charting progress in a really positive way. Thank you, James, very much indeed. That's super.
Thank you.
Right. Now we go on to agenda item 10, a briefing on the resources and waste strategy. I know our director will take us into this, and we have two staff who are going to present on this issue. Anne.
Thank you. Again, similar to the last item, we felt this would be useful to give you a briefing on some really big chunky areas for the department again, and within the remit of this committee. The government has a resources and waste strategy out that came out over a year ago now, and there has been a number of consultations coming out of that since, and they're ongoing. They will have significant impacts for how we deal with our resources and waste across the board, both as individuals and as organisations, and the local authority as the waste disposal authority. So we'll go through that and some of the more recent consultations for you. And the other aspect of the presentation is on our role as a waste disposal authority and just how that operates in the local market, just to give you a general briefing of that. My colleagues, Head of Service in the Environment and Waste side of the department, Vicky Cormie, and Team Manager Anna Lowe will be presenting to you, so I'll hand over to them now.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, as Anne said, just going to give a bit of an overview about waste management and the sort of key bits of policy and strategy, and some kind of general information about waste management in Leicestershire, some facts and figures, things like that. So as Anne said, the key UK-wide strategy on waste is the Resources and Waste Strategy, which actually came out in 2018. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it's been out for a couple of years, and Anna will give some more detail about some of the things that are coming out of that and the key consultations that have been out in the last couple of years. The other sort of key document is the 25-year environment plan. So the kind of key national pieces of waste policy. Historically, most UK waste policy really came out of Europe. So, a lot of the kind of strategic direction came out of Europe. The government is in the process of taking the Environment Bill through Parliament, and that sets out the government's agenda for environmental reform and governance post-Brexit. The bill's currently going through Parliament, and we expect that it's going to become law later this year. We expect it to sort of happen sometime later in the autumn this year. So everything that we'll sort of mention in relation to the Environment Bill is kind of what we're aware of in terms of the direction of travel, but we're still aware that there could be still some changes made to that bill before it becomes law. Locally, our waste strategy is the Leicestershire Municipal Waste Management Strategy. That document was last updated in 2011, and we're currently in the process of reviewing it. The Municipal Waste Management Strategy is a joint strategy between the County Council and all 7 districts. We're required to have a joint municipal waste management strategy. It's a legal requirement that in 2-tier areas you have a joint strategy that sets out how you're going to manage waste between the County Council as the Waste Disposal Authority and the districts as waste collection authorities. The current document, as said, it was last updated in 2011, actually ran out at the end of 2020. The review's currently underway. It's been slightly delayed by COVID. We'd hoped that we would have completed it by now, but that the current plan is that the review of that document will be completed in spring next year, and we'll be planning to bring a report to this committee. It may not be the next meeting, it may be the meeting in January, but we'll be bringing a report on the review of the waste strategy to a future meeting, so you get a bit more information about that. Okay, so in relation to how local authority waste collection and disposal services work, I mentioned before that we work jointly with the district councils. The district councils are waste collection authorities. So that means they're responsible for providing curbside collections of residual waste and recycling. So, the services that you'll all know as residents. The Waste Disposal Authority, so Leicestershire County Council as the Waste Disposal Authority, tells the WCAs, the waste collection authorities, where to deliver the waste that they've collected. In Leicestershire, 7 of the district council provide commingled dry recycling collections. So that's a collection where all dry recycling goes usually into one wheelie bin, sometimes into one bag, but it all gets mixed up together. Northwest Leicestershire does things a little bit differently. They provide a number of containers. Residents sort their dry recycling into those containers, and then the district council collect them separately. In relation to green waste services, 6 of the 7 districts charge for green waste collections. Northwest Leicestershire still provide a free service. So that's the role of the Waste Collection Authority. Leicestershire County Council, as the Waste Disposal Authority, is responsible essentially for providing outlets for the waste that's collected. So whether that's treatment or energy from waste or incineration outlets, or landfill, or the recycling or composting outlets, we provide those outlets and hold those contracts. We have a wide variety of contracts in place for managing waste. Some of those contracts are really big, multi-million-pound contracts. That might be some of the disposal contracts, significant values. Some of the contracts are really small, so you can see there, some of our contracts are less than £25,000 a year. We have contracts with, farmers who operate on-site composting for green waste. So really, really wide variety of different sizes and types of contracts. At the moment, about 60% of the black bin waste, the residual waste from Leicestershire, is actually disposed of or treated at facilities outside of Leicestershire. The budget for waste management is quite significant. It costs us approximately £25 million a year to dispose, treat and recycle waste. And you can see there, just to give you an idea of the costs involved, landfilling of waste can cost over £100 a tonne, up to sort of £145 a tonne. And the cost particularly of landfilling increases with landfill tax, and also, the more waste that's generated by members of the public, the more, the costs are that we have to meet. It's a demand-led budget. We have to dispose of the waste that our residents produce. Okay. The County Council also operate 14 recycling household waste sites. You might know those as the TIPs or recycling centres. We operate those directly, so that it's our own staff who operate those sites. We normally receive over 50,000 tonnes of waste each year at the recycling household waste sites, and more than 1.5 million customer visits, although it was a bit lower over the last year because of COVID restrictions. As well as the recycling household waste sites, we operate a couple of waste transfer stations. A waste transfer station is essentially somewhere that waste is bulked up. So, where you might have the district council in the refuse collection vehicle collecting waste from the curbsides. It's a relatively small vehicle. They would bring it into a waste transfer station, tip it off, and then it would be sent from there onto a disposal site in a much bigger vehicle. So it's just a way of bulking up waste. So we operate 2 of those ourselves. We have contracts with 2 more, and we're also in the process of constructing a big waste transfer station at Barden. Typically, our waste transfer stations handle around 80,000 tonnes of waste each year. I've said most of it is delivered by the waste collection authorities in their curbside collection vehicles. We also, at our Whetstone waste transfer station, we have a trade waste service. So it's generally small traders that use that service, and they bring in their trade waste and pay to dispose of it. And our turnover is about £0.8 million every year. This just gives you an idea of what a waste transfer station is. It's essentially a big shed. So you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but anyway, the top picture at the left-hand side is a big shed at the back with doors that go up and down to allow the vehicles in to tip waste. In front of it, the building you can see is it's basically an office. The sort of red bit you can see in the road there is a weigh bridge. So as the vehicles come in, they get weighed, they go into the shed, they tip off their material, and then they get weighed out. So that we know how much they've dropped off. And I'm sure it doesn't look like this now. This was just when it was being constructed. This is the inside of the Whetstone waste transfer station before any waste actually went into it. So it's very clean there, but you can see it's essentially a big shed. There'll be some bays in there now to sort of separate out the waste. And this is just an image of the Whetstone recycling household waste site. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with our recycling household waste sites. Okay, I just thought I'd move on to a few waste facts and figures just to give you a sort of idea of what waste we collect. Local authority collected waste. So I suppose this is really just to make the point that local authorities, the most of the waste that we deal with is waste collected from households, but we do also deal with, and the districts do also deal with, things like street sweepings, potentially waste from municipal parks and gardens, beach cleansing waste, not so much in Leicestershire, but fly tipping as well is something that will come through local authority systems, and also some commercial and industrial waste. That's generally where the district councils have trade waste collection services, or the waste, for example, that we take in at the Whetstone waste transfer station. That gives you an idea of the sort of commercial or industrial waste that we that we deal with. I've included this pie chart really just to give a bit of a sort of idea of the scale of the amount of waste in the UK. So in the UK in total, there's about 220 odd million tonnes of waste produced per year. But you can see that household waste is actually quite a small chunk of that. So household waste is about 12% of the total waste that's produced in the country. So that's the bit that we really focus on. But I think it just sort of sets the context really that I think if we think about waste, generally we think about household waste, but actually most of the waste that is produced in the country actually comes from different sources. So, you can see the biggest chunk there is construction, demolition, excavations, dredging, that type of waste. And then you've also got the commercial waste sector, and then your kind of agricultural, forestry and fishing. So it's really just to make the point that it's a lot of waste, but it's a relatively small proportion of what actually gets produced in the country as a whole. Okay. This graph's a bit busy, but hopefully I'll sort of explain and make the point. This is local authority collected waste. So this is the stuff that we deal with as local authorities. You can see that since the beginning of since 2000, this line here is recycling rate. So you can see that there was quite a significant increase in recycling between 2000 and 2010, and then it's kind of pretty much stagnated around 45%. This period here, sort of in the early 2000s, was when a lot of recycling collections and things expanded significantly. We all got used to recycling at home, but really we've sort of reached a bit of a plateau, I think is the sort of key point here. This yellow section here, so the yellow bars, that's the amount of waste that's been being disposed of to landfill. So you can see that, over time, the amount of waste that is going to landfill has decreased. And the white section here is incineration with energy from waste. So basically incineration, household waste incineration. You can see that landfill has gone down, incineration has gone up, and recycling has gone up, but has reached a bit of a plateau. Okay, right, again, this I know it's a bit busy, this pie chart, but this basically shows what is in black bins. So what are residents putting in their black bin? This is national data, it's from 2017. We've previously had some sort of local Leicestershire data, broadly in line with what this is showing. I think the key points here, and this probably be of interest later on in the presentation when Anna's talking, you can see that the biggest chunk is food waste. There's sort of 34% of what is going in residents' bins is food waste. So that's one area where there's potential to get that waste out of the residual bin. The other sections, I suppose the other key take-home point really from this is that there's quite a lot of material that's still going into people's black bins that could have been recycled. So there's quite, a percentage there. That chunk's paper and card, 13%. All of the district councils in Leicestershire collect paper and card for recycling. And if you accept that there'll be a bit of that that's contaminated and, maybe shouldn't be recycled, actually, there's still quite a lot more that could be done in getting that paper and card into recycling collections, even with current collections. Same goes for glass, metals. There's some garden waste here. All of the district councils provide garden waste services. So I suppose that's the take-home point, really. Food waste is still a big issue, and also there's more that residents could be pulling out even with the existing collection services. It wouldn't need new collection services, but there is something there about getting residents to either recognise that material, sort it more effectively, use their recycling collections more effectively. Okay, just some sort of high-level data. I know you're getting a presentation later on performance, so I won't go into this too much, but just gives you a bit of an idea. In Leicestershire, we have just over 300,000 tonnes of household waste that we deal with every year, and that's about 1 tonne per household, roughly. Of that, 43.3% was recycled in 2021. And you can see there, you know, that percentage essentially split out by kilograms of recycling, kilograms of residual waste, but just gives you a bit of high level information. Okay, so what else are we doing? As a waste disposal authority, we're obviously providing practical services, disposing of waste, running the recycling household waste sites, running waste transfer stations. The other thing that we do is we work with residents on behaviour change, so we run waste initiatives. And these cover a wide range of things. You know, I won't go through this whole list, you can read it, but you know, we encourage home composting, we run Love Food Hate Waste campaigns to encourage residents to waste as little food waste as possible. We have grant schemes, number of seasonal campaigns, and just, I've only got a couple of slides left, but just to give you an idea of some of the types of events and initiatives that we run. Believe it or not, we get a lot of nappies, disposable nappies go in with people's recycling collections. So we've been working with Tidy Britain and some other local authorities on a campaign to encourage residents to keep disposable nappies out of their recycling collections. And Tidy Britain did some research about, you know, almost why people are putting nappies in their recycling collection. You know, is it because they've not got enough space in their black bin? Do they not understand what can and can't be recycled, and then have developed this campaign from that research? We also, you know, we run annual campaigns around various festivals. So whether that's Easter or Christmas, Halloween, you know, we try and run themed campaigns at different times of year. And we also have a number of campaigns that we do every year, such as Compost Awareness Week and Recycle Week. And then, I'll mention the Environment Matters newsletter. We have a new quarterly newsletter for residents. We used to have a composting chronicle, so it was a newsletter that focused entirely on home composting, but we've now expanded that so that it's more broadly environmentally focused. So it would pick up both the waste messaging, but also the kind of messages that James was talking about earlier about, you know, what can individuals do to reduce their environmental impacts generally. And then the last thing that I'll mention before passing over to Anna is we do have an environment grant scheme. So, you know, we have grants available for community groups who want to undertake projects in their local areas to reduce waste, and, you know, they can also apply for other environmental campaigns and schemes and things as well. So that's a quick kind of whistle-stop tour. I'll hand over to Anna now, who's going to give us a bit more information about the resources and waste strategy and some of the consultations that have come out recently. So I'll stop presenting.
Thanks, Vicky. Over to you now, Anna.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure how my presentation has disappeared. How do I bring it back up? Apologies.
Oh, sorry.
I'll put it back up.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that was my fault. I probably shouldn't have clicked stop presenting.
I think I just take control, don't I?
Yeah, sorry, that was my fault.
Hopefully it's coming up now.
There you go.
Okay. So I need to go through. Sorry, I'll go to my slides. Can everyone see that, or is the presenting mode not quite right? It looks quite small.
No, it's fine for us.
Is that okay? Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So this is an introduction to the Our Waste, Our Resources, a strategy for England. It came out in December 2018, so quite a while ago now, and it's guided by two overarching principles: to maximise the value of resource use and to minimise waste and its impact on the environment. The strategy will contribute to 5 strategic ambitions, and that's to work towards all plastic packaging that's placed on the market being recyclable, reusable or compostable by 2025, to work towards eliminating food waste to landfill by 2030, eliminate avoidable plastic waste over the lifetime of the 25-year environment plan, double resource productivity, and to eliminate avoidable waste of all kinds by 2050. The approach over time is obviously to reduce the amount of waste that is sent for disposal and prevent more waste occurring in the first place. So this chart shows that in 1990, the biggest element was number 5, which was the disposal, working towards in 2030, having the biggest element being prevention. In terms of the timeline, obviously, this was done in 2018 and the pandemic has occurred, so some of these dates are a little bit out of kilter now, but there are elements in here such as the deposit return scheme coming in 2023, extended producer responsibility coming in 2023, which I'll come to next, and then also a UK recycling rate of 65% by 2035. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with my slides. I can't seem to move them along where I can see them.
We have the next one.
Okay, and I don't know what to do after that because then I can't see my next one. Apologies. I don't know how.
Easier, Anna. I can. Do you want me to take control of them and then I can just move on?
But that'd be brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I'm struggling to see them. That's great. Thank you. So following on from the resources and waste strategy, there was an initial round of consultations which came out in May 2019, which we responded to, and now 3 secondary consultations were published in May and June this year, which we also responded to, and they cover 3 main policy areas, and that is a deposit return scheme for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, reforming the UK packaging responsibility system, which is otherwise known as extended producer responsibility, that's for the whole of the UK, and consistency in household and business recycling collections, which is just for England, and that closed on the 4th of July. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what they contain. Thanks, Kat. So extended producer responsibility first. This is an extensive consultation and quite complex. So in 2019, government set out the case for significant reforms to the packaging responsibility system. And importantly, what it included was making producers pay the full net cost of managing packaging once it becomes waste, setting more ambitious targets and introducing clear and consistent labelling for recyclability. These powers will be taken through the Environment Bill, and that will enable the introduction of the extended producer responsibility scheme for packaging. Government have indicated the changes to the system will be operational by 2023 with a phased approach. It also proposes minimum recycling targets for 6 packaging materials. There will be payments made to local authorities because obviously we manage the waste when it becomes the packaging when it becomes waste, and they will be based on both the tonnages and the quality of the packaging waste that is collected. There will be new registration and reporting requirements for reprocessors and exporters of packaging waste, and a possible ban on the export of plastic waste to countries that are not members of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. The next policy area is the deposit returns scheme. So this was due to be launched in 2023, and this is now due to the pandemic more likely to be late 2024. The primary objectives are to increase recycling rates, increase the quality of recycling and reduce littering. It is not a reward scheme. Consumers would return drinks containers to designated points and they would redeem the deposit that they paid upfront upon purchase of the container. There are 2 models that have been proposed by government. There is an all-in, so that will include all drinks containers in scope with an upper size limit of 3 litres. And then there is also the on-the-go, so that is drinks containers in scope that are less than 750 ml in size, and they're more likely to be consumed outside of the home. It will now be based on material rather than product in terms of what's in scope. So it will include PET bottles, that's normally the bottles that you can buy squash, etc. in, steel and aluminium cans and glass bottles, and it will include the cap where applicable. They propose to exclude HDPE bottles, so that's the opaque bottles that milk normally comes in, so they will not be part of the scheme, nor will beverage cartons, disposable cups, sachets and pouches. And government for the consultation assumed a 20p deposit and an 85% return rate by its third year in operation. Some of the proposals, of which there are many, are on return points. So it sets out the retailer options, proposing that all retailers who sell in-scope drinks containers will be obligated to host a return point. They are also looking at options for exploring alternative methods of return, mainly digital, and hosts of return points will be paid a handling fee. There is also an option to potentially voluntarily host a reverse vending machine, and that could be hosted at a recycling household waste site, for example. It will also include mandatory labelling, which will be legislated, so all in-scope containers are quickly identifiable, and this is try to minimise the risk of fraud. And there are many technology options that are currently being trialled in terms of how that may work. In terms of payments for local authorities, there were 3 options proposed. They're quite complex. Option 1 was allowing local authorities to redeem the deposit. People, I think it's recognised that will still not always return their containers. They will still end up in the curbside recycling or in the curbside residual. Option 2, deposit management organisation. That's the organisation that would look after the whole of the DRS scheme. They would make a payment to local authorities for those containers via an extended producer responsibility payment. And option 3 was a hybrid version, which contained a mixture of both of those scenarios. In terms of compliance, government consider the environmental regulators the best place to be the scheme regulators, but they will also consider the role for trade services within local authorities to regulate the consumer-facing obligations that are placed on retailers. And then next is the consistency in household and business recycling in England. So again, the ambition is to improve the quantity and quality of municipal waste recycled in England, increase recycling rates and ensure less waste goes to landfill. It wants to encourage local authorities to improve how they recycle and businesses to invest in recycling. The government also wants to create consistency in what can be collected for recycling, reducing consumer confusion. The government recognises that all these new duties will impose additional costs on local authorities, and they will ensure that costs are covered in line with government guidance on new burdens. Proposed that local authorities should be required to collect a core set of materials from the curbside by the end of 2023, except plastic film, which will come in later at 26-27. Collection containers will now be agreed at local level, whereas previously the government did propose that they may have standardised bin colours, but that is now not going to happen. They also propose that recyclable waste can only be collected together if it is not technically or economically practical to do so separately, or if no significant environmental benefit of collecting separately. And by 2023, to provide all properties and flats with access to at least a weekly separate food waste collection, including the provision of containers and liners, and that all local authorities have to arrange for collection of garden waste in 2023 financial year, and free garden waste is presented as their preferred option. And then next is, there's also a big area of the consultation on non-household municipal waste. So government want to increase the recycling of packaging, food and other recyclable materials beyond the household sector. So to ensure there's consistency between home, school and work. They propose that businesses and public organisations producing household-like waste should arrange for this to be collected as recycling. They propose the same waste streams as they do for the household in the same financial year of 23-24. The Environment Bill will require food waste to be collected from all non-household municipal premises that produce food waste. And again, it must be collected separately from the dry waste streams as well as separately from the residual waste. They are proposing measures to reduce the cost of recycling and waste management for small and micro firms, including making them exempt. And there's other considerations around local franchising of waste services, including joint collection of household and non-household municipal waste, and more waste drop-off sites, including bring sites and recycling household waste sites. So we did submit response to all the consultations. We're broadly supportive of the overall aims and objectives, felt that some areas may require further consideration, such as the government's understanding of the relationship between collection and disposal authorities. The composition of household waste as we know it is likely to change as a result of these reforms. We did have to ensure there was consistency in our responses because many of these consultations overlap with each other, especially the deposit return scheme and extended producer responsibility. There will be financial implications when the changes are implemented, but there needs to be further details provided before we can fully understand what these are. And the Leicestershire Municipal Waste Management Strategy Review, which is currently under review, will take account of the proposed changes and remain flexible enough to review and react to any significant changes. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour across 3 quite extensive consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And Vicky, of course, for the first half. Right, members, comments and questions. Rosita.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for that presentation. Very comprehensive, and there is a great deal in it. So, Chairman, indulge me, please, several questions. And because my eyesight isn't too good with the computer, I have to go slow. Now, going backwards from what you've just said, there are going to be an awful lot of changes which are dependent on not only changing the mentality of end users, but it also relates a lot to the way districts work. So the first question is, what are we doing effectively to work with our partners at the moment? Because implementation is of some of those is only 2 years ahead. And I was wondering, if we are doing some work, could we have a quick report of what is being done and what are we going to do to move forward effectively to ensure that everybody sings of the same hymn sheet?
Okay.
That's number one.
Yeah,
and then,
let's do this quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, number one, any comments from officers for that? And
sorry, Chair, maybe Anna could give a bit more detail, but at the local level, we're in a partnership with the district authorities and the city council as well. They're involved in a slightly different footing, but we do communicate and work in partnership well across the authorities. Obviously, more wider, there's a number of established partnerships across waste resources side of things, representing the sector. And through those, we will look to support each other and, raise the awareness of this agenda, and also use those as lobbying with the government and to have that conversation with the government, because we do recognise that it's not an action for any one individual authority. As you say, this is about a wholesale change in how people view and act in this area. So, it can't just be done by one authority. It has to come from nationally, and we need to be doing our bit at the regional and the local level as well. There are a number of partnerships we work within, and we'll continue to do that. I don't know if Anna or Vicky have got any more detail on that.
I would just add that, yes, with the strategy review, that is as Leicestershire Waste Partnership, so I'm working closely with the districts on that. And when we do any initiatives, I try and engage. We obviously all engage together to try and get those messages out to the wider public.
Thank you. Yes, but I was also very much talking, say, for instance, if food waste collection comes in, districts, there will be a tremendous cost to the districts, and it needs to be well planned. So, I'm not talking about, your newsletters and whatever. I'm talking about the actual actions that have to be taken. For instance, if we're going back to collection points, for instance, districts will have to be, because when I was little in Germany, I collected them and got my pocket money, but I'm too old to bend down now. So, but what is being done to get that buy-in that districts are effective to do these sort of things?
Did you want me to
just clarify that again, Rosita, with regards to
food waste?
Food waste, okay, specifically food waste.
Yeah. Go on.
Sorry, I was just pausing there because I thought one of my colleagues was about to talk. No,
Yeah.
just in terms of that, you're absolutely right. I'll start off and then they can add to it then if that's all right. You're absolutely right. It will take extensive planning. You know, the implications are if this goes forward, it will be a mandatory thing. So the government will be bringing it in. As part of this, the food waste and wider proposals they've got, they have said that the government will meet the net additional cost for authorities in doing that. Now, you know, we could look at previous experience in the past to know if those costs would be fully met or not. That remains to be seen. I think it will be challenging for authorities. There will be massive implications for the collection authorities, be they unitaries or be they districts. And there were implications for us as disposal authorities. We're going to have to put in place contracts and facilities to be able to deal with this. It's not something we're doing at the moment. So the whole system is going to have to do substantial planning to meet whatever mandatory requirements actually are legislated by government. So you're absolutely right. There will be a whole ton of work around this that, you know, hasn't even really begun in a lot of areas. So I take your point on, but actually, you know, as with any new legislation that comes on, we as local authorities have to do the work to then implement that as required.
I think it's quite frightening where we are. Thank you. My next question is in relation to page 50, which is the pie chart. It's a very old note. Sorry, that's a food waste one, and that is being dealt with. It is there it is. It is page 48. Now, the national waste figures of 2018. Now, we have got a great big, still not the right one. It's the one where it shows that the commercial waste yes, it is the one, page 48. So the CDE, construction, demolishment and excavation, which is 137 million tons. Now, that is likely, that's 2018. The building agenda has been going up and up in a great momentum. We're still required to build all of these houses. So that figure is likely never to go down. It's going to go up. And that is the commercial, and then there's a commercial waste, but the demolition and construction waste is constantly going to go up. So how can we influence it? Because it's unlikely to, well, in my opinion, it distorts the figures because we can't change that, and it's going to go up with the building and construction to go up. And so surely, rather than looking at 12% household waste and whatever, we should be looking, or nationally, how to reduce that and how to recycle some of that. So that's my next question.
Anne, I'm going to let Anne cover that because we are straying into commercial. Anne?
I agree that the construction, demolition and excavation activity will continue to go up. However, the challenges across the sector, all sectors that coming from government, is how do you, one, use less? When you do use it, how do you recycle it, i.e. reuse it? I mean, for instance, even us on our road schemes, we are looking at when we're planing out part of the road, how do we recycle on that and reuse it? Now, some instances we're able to do that and we take it off site and we do it. Sometimes there's a mechanism whereby you can recycle on site and then reuse the stuff. The more we're a small bit player in any of this compared to, you know, what's covered by that construction, demolition and excavation element that you see there on that slide. But the more the sector and the industry begins to do that, while the activity is going up, it doesn't necessarily mean the amount of waste coming out of it will continue to go up. If anything, it should go down if all these policies and the activity and the behaviours all change around it.
My next question is one of ignorance. Looking at the Whetstone Waste transfer station, and I had to use it, the Whetstone, the tip, for the first time the other week to take all my green waste. But How, for instance, near me, there is a private waste transfer station, and they have got a shed. And when I go to the garage, they've got all this rubbish laying in there. So how Western is one of ours, and it's all regulated. But how do things like these skip firms who pick up waste, how does that fit into the system? How is that regulated? Because it just never gets into my head. So the question is purely of ignorance, trying to seek information.
Okay, back to Anne.
Sorry, I'm going to hand over to Vicky or Anna on this for the precise detail.
Do you want me to pick that one up? Yeah, I mean,
Yes, please.
Thanks. The waste industry is regulated by the Environment Agency. So where we operate any of our sites, so whether that's recycling household waste sites or the transfer stations, they operate. We have to get a permit from the Environment Agency to operate the site, and the permit sort of sets out the conditions in which we operate. So for a waste transfer station, for example, that would include the hours that we can be open, the tonnage of waste that we can have, how long waste can remain on site, those types of issues. And any private firm would also be regulated in the same way as we are in operating our sites.
Thank you. And my last one, Chairman, you're glad to know, it is and I think that is a bit of a controversial one. But if we are looking at the waste created, if we are looking that we want to lower the carbon footprint, if we're looking at the increasing cost of landfill and, you know, possibly eventually running out of landfill, and then looking later on at your slides that we want to see an increase into incineration, turning waste into energy, why haven't we got a bigger focus on incineration? You know, I know it's controversial with some, but surely that is more cost effective and environmentally friendly in the long run. So just generally clue me up on that, and thank you for answering all my questions.
I'll let the director direct this one.
Okay, thank you. I'll start anyway. I mean, our position actually is we're technology neutral. We will look at whatever is the best, you know, source, etc., that we can do, and within the overall business case for that. However, what I would say, and chances are we'll probably touch on it in the performance report with some performance indicators, is we are moving away from landfill and more to energy from waste. That, as you understand it, you know, the significant amount of waste we have are tied up in big contracts. It's only when those contracts are renewed that actually we have the opportunity to then direct into a different type of technology, taking into account, you know, all the different factors that we look at across the board. More recently, at the moment, we have got a provision in place that sees increasing levels of waste getting put into it, which means more incineration, less landfill, and in a couple of years' time we'll have other contractual arrangements coming into play, which again will help with that one. So we are very much focused on considering any type of technology, but moving away from landfill, because that very much is the government's policy position, and that for many of the reasons you've stated.
Right, thank you. Well, we've had a torrent of questions from you, Rosita, and still some to come. Amanda?
Just a couple, actually, hopefully much smaller. Sorry, Rosita. Obviously, at the moment, we already have a situation where the districts do the waste management differently. Do we see recycling rates improve? Or, you know, what is the difference? Do we have outliers in terms of particular areas of Leicestershire that do more poorly in terms of recycling to others? Is there any work that we can do around there? I think the, you know, the difficulty with some of the strategy stuff is we're talking about how we're reusing and recycling waste. There's very little in there about reduction. And I think that for me is probably where I'm really concerned. For example, you know, You only have to litter pick Meridian Business Park on a Sunday to know that 2 days later it will be full of McDonald's waste again. So, you know, these kinds of producer pays scenarios, how do we see these being implemented? And finally, I suppose this is sort of the extra is as consumers, you know, I rock up to Next and I'll buy something from Next and I'll pay 10 pence for my bag. I can order it the same product online and the amount of plastic that it gets sent with is astronomical, yet there is no surcharge for that kind of wrapping, or there doesn't seem to be. So is there anything in that's due, that's on its way for that?
Okay, if you'd like to ask.
Anna or Vicky, I just know you've got lots of detail on that kind of thing.
Sorry, Anna, I can see you're talking, but I think you're on mute.
So if I just pick up a couple of the points, Vicky. So in terms of, absolutely right, waste prevention should be top of the tree. The government did release a consultation on the waste prevention programme for England. So we're awaiting the responses from that, and that picks up some of the points you've made around waste prevention. In terms of extended producer responsibility for packaging, in the future, the more the producers put materials on the market that's less recyclable, the more they will pay for that. So the hope is that will influence, and that policy will influence and make sure that producers put less packaging on the market, and if they do, it is more recyclable. That was just a couple of points, Vicky, I'm sure.
Vicky, anything else?
I just wanted to add, I think there was a question about the levels of recycling in the district, and while, to be honest, I can't remember off the top of my head all the different district recycling rates. I mean, there are variations in the levels of recycling that we get from the districts. Actually, you know, we do work quite closely with them, and one of the things that we work really quite closely with them particularly is around contamination. So one of the issues is it's not just the sort of the absolute tonnage of recycling that gets collected. One of the main problems that we have in dealing with the recycling is actually about people putting the wrong things in the bin. So whether that's items that aren't actually collected for recycling, or you know, things that never should have been in the first place, the example of nappies that I gave earlier. And you know, we're doing quite an extensive amount of work on that, you know, running campaigns and working quite closely with some of our district partners to really try and get that messaging out to the public. So you know, part of that is about identifying and recycling more, but some of that is just, you know, discouraging people from putting the wrong things in the bin. Our districts on the whole collect a consistent they all, you know, with a couple of minor exceptions, collect the same items for recycling. So all Leicestershire residents can recycle the same range of things. Really, we're focusing on how we get people to identify those items better, and also to identify the things that we really don't want in the bin because they cause us problems with the processing.
Okay, thank you. All right, Amanda. Bill?
Thank you. Yes, my spine pot is not here this afternoon, so she knows this one will be coming. Reuse facilities are sites. We've been talking about it for 3 years now, and I've not yet to see it actually in operation at any of the sites. So that's the first thing, you know, let's reuse what we can. Incineration is a very interesting subject. We had a 5-member panel of that for a few years ago. Most of us agreed we should take as much out of the waste stream for recycling as possible. The problem with incineration, it encourages you to put those things into incineration because you need plastics to increase the calorific value of what you're burning. If you don't, you've got to introduce other means of that, which is usually gas, to actually get the value up to actually burn, to incinerate the goods. So we should take as much out as possible as we can out of the recycling, the wood, the plastics, the paper, and to incinerate, encourage you to put it in. So there's this balancing out there to be drawn. And just the last point, Chair, we've got a group called Plastic Free Oadby. Residents have got together and putting pressure on everybody, including shopkeepers, not to use plastic containers, plastic bags, and it's working really well. Hoping to spread that to the rest of the borough. My last point, when you shut me down, you shut me down on this one, because I remember we argued very passionately when the Cabinet and the group cut the budget for recycling education. That to me was a wrong move. They cut the budget on that, and that should not have been done, because we're now suffering from that, because we're not put the effort into getting residents to recycle as much as possible. And I think that was a wrong move at the time.
And the question, Bill? Oh, that's all right then, fine. If that's the case, I'll just refer you to page 49 and say that, you know, the plastics, the incineration rates have remained fairly constant now for the last 5 years or so. So I think, you know, we know what we'll be dealing with there. And I do wonder, and that's with EFW. So it looks as though they are not increasing, but there we go. All right, I'll leave that with you as the facts speak there on that particular chart. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there we are. Are there any other questions? Okay. Sorry, Brian.
Thank you, Chairman. One very quick question for a quick answer. Anna and Vicky, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative. In the first part of the presentation, it was put over as a demand-led service, and some recycling household waste sites in the county have been temporarily closed. Any indication when these might be resumed and how that information being communicated to residents? Thank you.
I'll let Anne pick that one up.
Yes, we have. We've got 3 sites closed at the moment, but the prime reason for that, well, for 2 of the sites, is at the moment we are struggling in terms of drivers. Staff shortage. I'm sure you know members will have seen in the national media, you know, there is a shortage nationally of HGV drivers, and that is impacting our services. Our ability, the reason we need drivers is we have to be able to empty those bins that the public come along and deposit their waste in. You know, when they get full, we have to empty them, else we can't keep the sites open. And unfortunately, at the moment, with the staff shortages we have, we're just not able to support those. So we've taken the pragmatic decision to close those in order to be able to keep the other sites open and have confidence and keep the other sites open and operating. We will reopen them as soon as we can. However, at the moment, as I say, the position is we're just struggling to recruit and staff up fully in order to be able to facilitate those sites being opened. So, Chair, just one thing, Mr. Bolter asked about reuse. Yes, we have been talking about it for a long time, but unfortunately for the last 18 months we've been on pause because of the pandemic. There's not anything we could take forward in terms of reuse our sites when a pandemic was going on. You'll be pleased to hear, however, we are beginning to look at that work stream again now. So, you know, hopefully we'll be able to come back not too distant future to report some positive progress in that area.
Okay, thank you. Right. Any more questions on? Then we'll thank both Vicky and Anna for their very comprehensive report and also presentations, and the lead members indicated that he'd just like a few words.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be really, really quick. You've just had a whistle-stop tour of our responsibilities around waste. That won't be anything new to existing members. Some of the new members might have found it interesting. I dare say actually some of the older members actually that have been things that triggered their memory and they hadn't thought about for a while within that excellent presentation. But you can see that we play a vital role in dealing with Leicestershire's waste. We are responsible for disposing of that waste, albeit not collecting it. And the general rule of thumb that we work to is to reduce waste from going to landfill. And you can see on slide 49 of the report, we've been successful in that effect. One thing I would say, if you were to compare this authority to other similar authorities up and down the country in one of those fancy statistical graphs that get created and we're presented with, sometimes it might give the impression that we're not particularly well performing, but what it doesn't consider in those graphs is the amount of money that we have to spend here in Leicestershire. Other authorities that perform particularly well have at some point in time maybe given a PFI contract via government, equating to hundreds of millions of pounds. We've not been in that position. So with the resource envelope that we have, we do very, very well in dealing with our waste. Anne's already dealt with the question from Mr. Bolter about reuse centres. And in addition to that point that was very well made about the pandemic, let's not forget that we externalise. Our waste and recycling centres were run by external companies for us. We've internalised those arrangements now. And we always said a couple of years ago when we embarked on an agenda to increase reuse that we needed to develop a market. So hopefully now we're managing the pandemic in a way that we can get back to some kind of normality. The department now can focus on actually delivering that marketplace, so we're able in the years to come to actually offer a reuse offer, if you like, at the waste and recycling sites. And finally, Chairman, if I may say, on the Environment Bill, this is a key piece of government legislation that's coming through. And actually, I think the government deserve a huge amount of credit. I know it's taken 3 or 4 years, probably longer than that, 5 years in the making to get where we are. Obviously, they've had a global international crisis to deal with, as every other country, which has taken priority. But the Environment Bill will be a profound change in how we tackle waste in our localities and how commercial organisations and industry deal with their own waste. And we've heard a little bit about extended producer responsibilities, which are very interesting. Time will tell. But it will be profound. There'll be massive changes here in Leicestershire to have to grapple with, and we'll have to, as we do always, work closer and closer with other organisations in tackling that waste. But it's exciting times in some respects, and you know, a new bill is desperately needed if we are to stand any chance in making a positive contribution towards climate change and reducing carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Super. Right. Now we come on to the last item on the agenda item 11, the Environment and Waste Performance Report to June 2021. And I know Anne has proffered as a whiz through that this time. Over to the Director.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this may be new to a number of members, but forgive me, and I'm aware you've had a couple of quite, meaty presentations, so I'll aim to do this fairly quickly if that's all right. And it comes back to the committee quarterly, so there'll be plenty of chance to get really familiar with it. I'll focus just on the indicators that have had an update this time, which are the ones that have a large either green, amber or red arrow in the column, the performance that says DOT, which is a direction of travel. They're the ones that have been updated this quarter. So on the strong economy strategic objective we have, the first ones there are electric vehicle charging locations per 100,000 population, and then the second one, electric vehicle ownership per 10,000 of population. Both those indicators have increased, so they're green. They're both still in the third quartile. That quartile, the end column there for your information, is data that's taken across a number of authorities, so comparator authorities. I think it's 33 in total, so counties, so directly comparable to us, and it measures how we're doing with them. Top quartile is the top 25%, etc. You get the gist of that. We're in the third quartile for those, so a long way to go, and I'm sure though a lot of work will continue in that area as we see more and more people uptake the use of electric vehicles, and therefore the charging facilities that need to support those. So they are going in the right direction, but we've still got a long way to go on them. If I move you down, further down that page at the bottom there, keeping people safe. This time round, we've looked again at performance there for this quarterly report. Environmental risk managed. This is about our environmental compliance system, and it looks at our own sites and our environmental compliance there. It's the type of things where it's non-compliance, for instance, drainage at some of our RHWS sites or oil filtration sites where we park some of our vehicles. Is that type of compliance. We have, while it says there's 5 there and we haven't seen any movement in the last quarter, we have got that number down from roughly, it was over 100 originally, and we've worked down, and we do have plans in place to tackle these. But for instance, one of them I know is we're doing some drainage works at one of our RHWS sites over the next few months. That will address that. But as you can see, they don't come around maybe that quickly. We plan them in. So sometime over the next couple of of quarters we'll see some of that move, but at this point in time it's remained static. If I move you down to the second page, sorry, apologies, I should say I'm at Appendix B looking at the dashboard. I didn't say that at the outset, apologies. So if I move you down onto the second page of that Appendix B under the Great Communities objective, the percentage of household waste sent by local authorities across the county for reuse, recycling, composting, obviously we've just been discussing this, it stayed relatively static. It's gone down just slightly from 43.5% to 42.8%. We have a target of 50%, so we're not meeting that, hence the amber RAG rating, and we're third quartile performance. Annual percentage of municipal waste sent to landfill, again, something we've just talked about, again, relatively static. It's gone down a wee bit. The aim is to be less than 30% of our waste goes to landfill. It's gone down slightly. We are in the fourth quarter, but as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, you know, these are tied up with some long-term contractual arrangements. Some things are changing at the moment gradually, and in the next couple of years, we've got other contractual arrangements that will come into play, which will see this figure change for the better. The next one, total household waste per household. This is always an interesting one. This and it's gone down slightly in performance, which means we've got slightly higher weight there of 1,018 kilograms per household compared to the last quarter's data we had. Third quartile performance. We're always, if I'm absolutely honest, kind of, you know, more at the kind of lower end of the quartile performance. Now you could say that's linked to we're a relatively affluent county, therefore there's more waste, etc. Impacts of the pandemic's an interesting one because obviously, you know, lots of us have been at home more, therefore your waste streams are more focused at home rather than maybe if you've gone into the workplace before and you're, you know, getting rid of waste during the day, you know, lunch waste, etc. You know, so again, things will have been different over the last year, so it will be interesting to see how the trend continues going forward. I'll just move you down into the bottom of that page. Percentage of population, percentage feel protecting the environment is important. This is taken from a community insight survey. This is a survey that Leicestershire County Council does of a telephone survey, round about 1,600 people at a time, and they ask them a number of questions. So it's basically a temperature gauge that's done fairly frequently, and that is one of the questions that get asked. As you can see, fairly high percentage there, 97%, so relatively important, and that's staying fairly static when we're repeating that survey. Similarly, the next one, percentage think the council should do more to help protect the environment, 67% there, so being rated as important, but you know, 2/3 are saying we could be doing more or should be doing more, which is obviously going to be our challenge, as we know, if we've heard earlier on from the presentation from James. Just moving down onto the next page, under the affordable and quality homes outcome that we have, there's two indicators there. First one, % domestic properties with energy performance certificate rating C for existing properties. So we're talking about retrofit there. That has improved from 36% to 38.7%. We are in the fourth quartile, as you can see. I'm sure you'll agree, however, the challenge of retrofitting the existing housing stock, you know, can be quite considerable. So, you know, something that is ongoing, we will continue to, you know, support the work going on there. However, you know, there is a long way to go on that one. On the other side of the coin, however, for new properties, we are doing very well, as you'll see from the next indicator, with 97.3% actually at that energy rating or above for new build properties coming into the county, and that's top quartile performance. So, you know, a really positive one there. Just moving down onto the next page of corporate enablers. There's a few on this one, and we're moving more into the kind of emissions side of things. So carbon emissions from LCCs on buildings there, we're going in the right direction again with the data showing that we are reducing that. That's gone down to just 3,393 tonnes for the last quarter, down from 3,477 tonnes, and meeting its target. So, you know, that's emissions from the fuel use. We use electricity, gas, any other fuels we've got across our building estate. The next one is our carbon emissions from street lighting and traffic signs. Traffic signs, because the ones that are lit, obviously, not all signs are lit, but some are. You see that has come down again, but just very marginally. To be honest, it's when we did the major transfer of our street lighting stock from the old type sodium lamps to LEDs, we saw a massive drop there. Now at the moment, what we're doing is we're kind of doing what we call dimming and trimming, and it's basically eking out and squeezing out more savings there, but the main savings in emissions has been achieved with that major, you know, 69,000 street lamps have been changed, and we saw a radical drop there. However, we'll continue to you know, basically sweat that asset and squeeze some more out of that where we can. Moving down then, percentage waste recycled from LCC sites, so that's their own buildings, that has gone down from last time. It's not meeting its target of 62.3. It's gone down from 53 to 48, you can see. Now, I did ask some questions about that. Why would that be the case? And my understanding is it's the composition of our waste from our sites. One of the things I've noticed on a few occasions I've been in the building, we no longer at the moment do food waste collections. We used to do that on every floor. There was food waste collections in this building. That's not as happening because there's so few staff in. That changes the whole composition and percentages of our waste, and that's impacting negatively on these figures. So again, the test will be, however, as we transition into different ways of working and using our buildings, how that figure changes and how we can drive that up, you know, to a better place. The tons of waste produced from LCC sites has gone down, as you would expect, and is way under you know, the target, which is positive. But again, I would reflect that, you know, we have been in a situation where our buildings are being used differently because of the pandemic. So again, I think that's going to be impacting on those figures there. Amount of renewable energy generated as a percentage of consumption, that is going up. Is rated red, however, because it's not quite meeting its target. So we're at 16%, but the target's 21% there. That's coming from our solar panels, our biomass boiler, etc. So it's looking at what more we can do to expand that kind of side of the estate to, you know, up those figures in terms of renewables. And moving to the last couple there, percentage of staff who say LCC is doing enough to reduce its environmental impact, that's up at 93% and staying fairly static. That information comes from, we have an e-learning package for staff on the environment, and that's one of the things I asked. So that's where that data comes from. But as you see, fairly static, and, you know, a positive figure on that one. And lastly, total business miles claimed is, you know, it meets its target and is continuing to go down. I guess the challenge will be moving forward as I say we transition into different ways of working, keeping those figures down. You know, but we'll be closely watching that trend over time. I think, if I'm correct, that takes me to the end of that, but happy to take questions because I appreciate that was a real whiz through and I've missed a lot of indicators out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sure it wasn't deliberate. Okay, that's lovely. And I will say also that we have Nicola Truslove with us. Welcome, Nicola, to answer any detailed questions, should there be any from the panel. Bill?
Thanks, Chair. The energy from buildings, C rating, how does that compare to the rest of the country? Are we the same as the rest of the country, or?
Well, that says the quartile. The information I've got is then what's that showing in terms of our quartile performance there. And I think I'm not on the right page, but I think we're quite low for our existing buildings, aren't we? Fourth quartile. That's comparison to 33 other comparable local authorities. So I can't speak for the whole of the country, but in terms of those comparator authorities, it's, you know, at the lower end of the performance.
I think that depends, Chair, on the age of the property, doesn't it? Because this year, industrial town, a lot of Victorian houses built, no cavity walls, but other towns have got modern build with cavity walls. So it's difficult to judge actually how we're doing with the rest of the country.
I thank you for that very incisive comment. You're absolutely right. It does depend, and I'm sure, I don't know whether the basket that we're compared with or in does take that into account or not. But if it doesn't, then of course it's not right for us to be compared in that way, as you say. Okay, next question. Rosita?
Yes, and it is a very short one because I haven't got my head around this yet. We'll do by the next meeting or whenever we're looking at this again. I am a little bit confused, so please explain the indicators. And now looking at it, they appear to me to be our own indicator related to our aspirations. Is that true or am I wrong? Are there any national indicators? Because it doesn't show it. And then there is LCC indicators, black, and county indicators. Well, I can't get my head around that either. What's the difference between county and LCC? So can you just talk me through the mechanics behind our dashboard here? And at the moment, I find it a little bit confusing as well. You know, can we maybe look at it in the future to somehow simplify it? But I haven't got a comment on this yet because I haven't got my head around it. So just explain that to me, please.
I think it's geography, but I'm going to let the director answer that for you, and it'll become clear.
I appreciate it. Probably is, you know, first it takes a wee while maybe to, you know, really get into this. But in answer to your questions, in short, there's a mix of indicators there. There's some national ones, there's some local ones, etc. And some of those are historic. There was a number of years ago where we had a national data set and we were required to, mandatory, we had to report to government on a whole host of indicators. And some of those are hangovers for them because we still think they're indicators that are worthwhile. We should be looking at, reporting on, and continuing to monitor. For instance, those two under the great communities, which are at the top of page 82, percentage of household waste sent by local authorities, etc., and annual percentage of municipal waste, where it's got in brackets former NI 192 and 193, they were part of the national indicator set, but and we no longer have to report those to government. However, we still think they're valuable indicators. What we've done is, and they are, as I say, a mix of national, local, etc. But these indicators are things that either we've got the ability to get the data on and compare across, across other authorities, which again is helpful to us to benchmark ourselves. But they've been grouped under, things like great communities. So they are the council's strategic objectives. So in theory, what we're trying to do here is get some performance data that tells us, hopefully tells us whether we're moving in the right direction, trying to achieve those wider county council objectives, strategic objectives such as great communities, affordable and quality homes, etc., strong economy. But I do appreciate there's quite a range of indicators because actually we're monitoring and we're trying to report on a number of quite diverse services that will contribute to those higher objectives. One other point I want to make is you mentioned LCC and county. It should be the discipline here. Where it says LCC, it means the county council. So it's our own buildings, our own operations, our own services. If it says county, it's talking about the wider Leicestershire. So, there's a public out there, there's industry, etc. It's the whole of the Leicestershire. Where it says LCC, it's just us directly as a county council. So I hope that's clarified that point.
Okay. Could we maybe then indicate on the indicators for ease which ones are the statutory ones or whatever by some sort of, so we can, when we're looking at this eventually, that we know these are the statutory ones, these are, I don't know, either by a star or something. I leave it with you to think about, but it is very, very confusing and the whole thing is very complicated.
Okay, Rosita, we'll leave that with the officers to ponder and see if they can come back with something that is satisfactory. Nick, possibly the last question.
Yes, just a quick one, thank you. Mine one is regarding the red flag on the LCC fleet emissions. Why that's suddenly gone up, please? Page 83, third one down. It's 83 on my paper anyway.
Sorry, I'm just looking at that. That's data from 1920. So that last year, I don't know if Nicola can help me on that one. I'm just, nothing's come to mind. Nicola, do you know the source of that data then, just to help us, pinpoint? I'm just thinking in terms of, you wouldn't expect that to happen in terms of the pandemic, etc. Apart from, obviously, we have a lot of fleet vehicles and operations that have gone on throughout the pandemic. Our highway services, our waste services, etc. All those vehicles have been operating the same. The thing that's been different is, the commuting to work and the business mileage. That's the thing that the pandemic's impacted. However, I'll just refer to Nicola in terms of the source of that data to understand then what might better impact that.
Sorry.
Okay, Nicola.
Hi, yes. This actually comes from the department. I haven't got a great deal of information actually on this one. But the emissions from LCC fleet vehicles and plant provided and calculated by the LCC environment team, and I haven't had any additional information on why that's occurred. So I can certainly take that away and bring that back in a response if that's helpful.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Nicola. Anne?
Apologies, light has dawned. Sorry, it's obviously getting late in the day. If that's our own fleet vehicles, which is what Nicola has just confirmed, over the pandemic, because of social distancing, we then had to, for what we previously would have used one vehicle, we've had to use two vehicles because we couldn't have two individuals in a cab. So for many of our operations, we've had to increase the number of vehicles, which will obviously then increase our emissions. So apologies for taking such a long time to get to your answer.
That's all right. That's fine. Okay, and with no other questions, I'm just going to ask the lead member if you'd like to say anything on this particular aspect of performance.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have a great deal to say, you'll be pleased to know, other than once again, thank you to the team for putting the performance reports together. The only thing I would say about them, this is the inaugural meeting of this committee. This is testament to how seriously we're treating climate change and the green agenda here in Leicestershire. The performance indicators that you see before you are the qualified team's best attempts at providing us as members and members of the public with information about how we're progressing on this journey. Now, if you feel that there are indicators that are missing or there's information that would better suit interpretation of our journey, please do bring it forward to this committee meeting. The officers will then look at that in some detail and see whether it's worthy of at a future iteration of the performance reporting including. But for a starter for 10, I think it's a very good start, and it will help us assess and monitor our progress along this journey. The only final thing I'd like to say, Chairman, there was a question about a very observant and good question, as you pointed out, about building efficiency in and around Leicestershire compared perhaps to other areas. Can I just use this opportunity to plug the Green Homes grant that Leicestershire County Council are promoting at the moment? With the comms team here at the County Hall have done some work previously on this, but there are strict criteria, and I urge people, if they are listening, or if you want to take this message back to your residents in your parish councils, to look at the website, to look at the criteria. But for the right household, those homes grants can make all the difference, not only in terms of their heating sources, but the cost to them for paying for those heating and energy sources too. So that's the Green Homes grant, and with that, thank you for this inaugural meeting, Chairman.
Thank you, Blake. Much appreciated. Sorry, did I miss you, Amanda? Oh, okay.
It was just because Blake had mentioned the Green Homes grant, and it'd be really useful for us to actually look at how this is being marketed by the private companies that are promoting it. So I've had 2 of them at my door, different companies, and their opening gambit is, "Are you on benefits?" And that for me just feels like incredibly the wrong message, because whether you're on benefits or not, actually accessing retrofitting is really important. But secondly, those individuals who are on benefits probably aren't going to respond very positively to a negative way of trying to sell something, I think, that's quite positive. So I think maybe as a county council, if we've got companies we're endorsing to sell these sets of products for us, then that information would be really useful to go onto the website, because I immediately went on the website. I knew all about it. I'd read it. I went on the website to see what was there, and it was really informative, but the guys that are selling it on the ground, not so good. And I didn't know whether or not that could be taken back, please.
I think that's an absolutely super point. First hand, thank you, Amanda. Really good. Right, with that, this is and was our first and inaugural meeting. Can I thank members and officers for their contributions today? And looking on to the dates of future meetings at agenda item 12, can I just draw members' attention to those? And I'd like you to, this is me now, I'd like you to just bear in mind that it's 4:05 and we're leaving County Hall, and it's Friday. And Friday evenings are terrible in terms of transport and traffic. So just bear that in mind, and let me know how long it takes you to get home, because I just wonder if this is the right time for this meeting. But I don't know what members feel. I'll just leave that open for now, and maybe say possibly a morning might be better, but I'll leave that with you. And with that, thank you very much.